Welcome to Leading with Curiosity. Command and control leadership is dead. We interview leaders, entrepreneurs, and executive coaches challenging old paradigms and fostering cutting-edge leadership. Here's your host, certified executive coach, Nate Leslie.
Hey listeners, welcome back to Leading with Curiosity. I have another new one for you. Today, I'm the guest. Because just about a year ago, my friend who's with me today, Lars Brüning, was on our episode 53, and that episode and Lars's insights were streamed like 10 times more than any other episode. And so what we thought we'd do today is bring Lars on. He's such a curious guy. He's a coach himself, massive global corporate leadership experience. And so Lars and I get together often and talk about the business and how we engaged with clients and best practices. And we had a chance to work together a few months ago in Switzerland, and it felt to us and to some of our clients like we'd been working together for years. So today, Lars is going to be the host. He's got some questions for me, and I know it's going to turn into a back and forth. So the topic here is really how we can engage with clients over a long term, what a journey looks like, some useful examples of some of the powerful tools that we use. Lars, welcome to your first hosting gig of Leading with Curiosity.
Thank you so much, Nate. I have the goosebumps on my skin, I can tell you. This
Nice.
is exciting. Exciting to be together again with you. And it's true, we met about a year ago. And ever since, any interaction with you has been inspirational to me and very productive work together. So I trust we will enjoy this one and hopefully some of our listeners or viewers as well.
Great.
Nate, let's just dive into it because as a coach, we are always on the journey. We are never ready with our development. We always look to support others to evolve and develop, to find new options of how to look at things and deal with situations.
Yeah.
At the same time, we evolve,
Yeah.
learn, and change. Can you share with us a bit your journey over the past, 12 to 24 months or so of your development, coaching individuals, coaching teams? How is that going? How is that developing? How is it changing?
I'll give you a couple examples. One literally was when my mentor and partner, Mark McGregor, said, "You got to meet this guy, Lars. The world is moving to leader as facilitator, meetings becoming workshops, letting the people do the work." And in that moment, I remember I was in a client's office with Mark, with a global company, and I just thought to myself, of course it needs to. And that's the coach approach. Leaders need to take this curious mindset and allow their teams to thrive. So that started my journey with you, and that has really continued to influence how I go about my work. And a few clients having that chance to really kind of give them the absolute best, like there almost are no barriers in the engagement. And so what can we create together using different tools like personality assessments that map the team, culture assessments that really help them see how people are currently feeling and what we can do about it. And then ongoing coaching with some very senior leaders tackling some very real world problems. That experience over the last 18 months has really helped me even see more and more clearly the power of this work and the impact that it can have.
Exciting journey. Let's talk about the impact that it can have before we
Yeah.
go into the tools. Maybe sometimes it's good to see as what does it really mean? What is the difference it makes for and on people?
Yeah.
So I know you use a couple of these tools. Maybe you want to go there and
Yeah.
quote
Well,
some
one
of them.
example before we even dive into the tool is just using data, right? I worked with one leader a couple of years ago who really believed that not micromanaging was his greatest value, right? Which makes sense, right? He wanted his team to be autonomous. He wanted them to feel invited to really take control of the situation. What the data showed us was pushed too far. His team was feeling unsupported. They felt like he didn't know what they did, what they were responsible for. He They felt like he didn't care. And the data uncovered this, and he said, "Oh my gosh, that's how my team is feeling. I've been trying to help them feel the opposite." And so we made a couple of tweaks, and of course, the power of effective one-to-one connections with them and finding out what is most important to them and their priorities and what they're working on and how they see this job that they're in fitting and adding to their own career development goals. And that whatever frequent meant to that leader and that team he was leading, frequent, highly effective one-to-ones, it was just this light bulb moment. And of course, when we gather data another 6 months later, their experience of him had completely shifted in a really positive way. So that's one use of it. Another one was recently, you and I were working with somebody. We were using the Principles Us personality tool. And again, doesn't matter what the tool is. We'll get into that in a minute. But where he and a colleague were looking at their own profiles, comparing each other, which the tool does. And he said, "Oh my gosh, Nate and Lars, I thought just because I was really similar in one part, like my detail orientedness of my personality with this woman, I just assumed we'd be similar in most of it." And you realize that was kind of the only real characteristic or trait that they really shared. And he said, I'm going to see everybody in a whole new way now because I just see it on paper here. And yet, again, this stuff isn't rocket science. It's actually quite common sense often. He said, it's so common sense that of course we wouldn't be similar in every area. So his blind spots were removed in that moment. Those are powerful, powerful, human-centered things that I've witnessed getting to facilitate this for people.
And these are surveys, right, that you ask the team to fill prior to a workshop or to a further interaction. How do you set that up? How do you win them over to fill another questionnaire?
Right, and how do we not over survey them to death? Yeah, great example. So the first one is the High Performance Index from the Supporting Lines Institute in Vancouver. We always say it's far more than a survey. It's an assessment, an academically valid assessment, which means it measures what we say it measures, and that it's also a diagnostic, so it makes recommendations. So part of the sharing the vision or the compelling power of that in the early engagement with a leader is to say, look, which is why my brand is the coach's playbook. There's an infinite number of plays we could run as a coach, playing on my former life as an athlete, and we shouldn't. Let's gather some data and zero in on what matters most to you right now. So in that case, the High Performance Index, which we have many episodes at Leading with Curiosity where we've talked about that, it can be used as a self-assessment, as a prediction of how people think their people might answer these questions. Can be used for a 360, can be used for a team as small as 10, or to an organization in multiple languages of thousands of people. And so it has an aspect of it called a culture map, where you can literally look at a map of data. And for people who don't like data, this is very visual, where green is great and orange is area of concern. And you can zero in on the dark green. What is currently great? Oh, who's doing that? What team is feeling great about how they're performing and the human experience they're having? The orange is, oh, okay, where do we need to spend time? What needs immediate attention and correction? For leaders who are really busy, often not together very much in these global teams or a local organization, let's find out where it's great, where it's not, and do something about it. The other one, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, before we go to the other one,
Yeah.
when we worked on this together, what I found, and for me it was honestly the first time that I worked with that tool, what I found particularly interesting and valuable to the team was these areas of where would we want to look at, and then we give it back. We show the data and we give it back to the teams to say, so where do you want to look at? And then they prioritize, and then the tool even offers practical examples of how to handle it, how to improve accountability if that is a topic, how to improve effective one-on-ones, how to reach the level of effective one-on-ones.
Yeah.
So all sorts of activities that naturally are part of a high-performing team that delivers results and has a positive human experience are being practically, teams are being practically led into, and we were together
Yeah.
able of really practicing this on the ground with the team.
And that you mentioned we could tell them what to do, and the assessment does make recommendations, but that's the beauty of you and I being a coach is we don't know their day-to-day business. So here's where we get to say, here's what the data's showing. What do you make of it? What do you want to celebrate? Where do you want to spend your attention? And then, of course, yes, okay, I'd like to spend my attention here. Lines up or doesn't line up with the recommendations, but it, as you can imagine, very often does highly correlate between what they think they should do. And then from there, we can create those actions. And we're not done there. When we left them after those couple of days, we're not done. And that's, I think, something that's unique about this approach too. It's not a one and done offsite. So they declare some priorities as a team. The leader endorses that from a hierarchical structure. They're all on the same page. And then through continuing to coach the leaders, either one-to-one and in teams, in a model we call the shared experience model, we can keep the engine running on that, keep revisiting it, while as a coach we're helping them explore the challenges they're now facing a month or 2 months or 6 months from now. But we have those overarching themes that we can help them make connections to. And then, of course, best practices, which I'm doing next week as I head back to Europe to work with them, gathering the data again. Where were we at month 1? Where are we at month 7? Where are we going to be at month 13? What do we want to focus on? Are things getting better? Things getting worse? Where is that happening? And so that ongoing nature that a coach can help with versus just a training, there can be great training programs, but there's a difference between a training program and ongoing coach support is really powerful.
Yeah, to underline that, and the quote that I'm now going to quote, it could have been from you because it really falls into how you think about that. It's from a very dear colleague of mine that I worked with in the last company I was working in, Ana Lucia, and she had posted that recently, where she said she's sick and tired of these offsites that are being done with teams, leadership teams or teams, where people are completely excited, 2 or 3 days, very good time, lots of good input, lots of great ideas how to do things differently, lots of intention to do it differently. And the next day in the office, often Monday,
Yeah,
all the old stuff is there and the old behaviors continue and the change isn't really happening. Versus just being with the team and being close with the team and helping the team in the moment that the work is there to do it differently. So being in the team discussions as you do regularly,
yeah,
and then saying, well, you have these topics, so let's discuss that in a very different way this time than you normally do. And I think recently you told me the reaction of the team was, hey, that was cool. Can we do this more often? Hey, can we
yeah,
even do that without Nate? And
yeah,
even though we like being with them, but it's something to celebrate when they feel like, oh, there's a change that becomes real for us. It's useful
yeah.
for us, and we can make this part of how we operate. So this staying with the team seems to be very, very important. What do you
Staying
think?
with the team, yeah. And I love the provocative quote from your colleague, right? And it's an and, not a but. And I love the power of that offsite. It's what you do with it to keep the wheels turning, keep the train headed down the right track. That's where the power is. It's almost like the offsite's the beginning, not the end, right? And anyone who's involved in change management or change leadership knows using every vehicle possible to continuously share the wins and reinforce the new vision. Just because it was said in an offsite 2 months ago does not mean it's still happening. So that's this coaching thing is a journey, and they'll never remember everything you talked about. So what is the one big thing? Leadership Circle is so great at stating that. What is the one big thing that you could shift, or even one small thing, really? What is the one thing that you can shift in your behavior as a leader that will over time have the biggest impact? Right? It's like 1 degree course corrections. I live in Vancouver, Canada. There's a beautiful harbor with these big ships headed out to the Pacific Ocean. I don't know the math on this, but here's the metaphor I use. A 1 degree course correction of one of those ships that was headed for Korea, ends up in Australia. I don't know if that's 1 degree, but we're looking for 1 degree course corrections and
It's definitely another
continuous.
country, yeah.
Yeah, definitely
Maybe
another
Japan
country.
or
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe Japan. Yeah. Still different than North Korea, right? Um, And the same goes for the personality stuff too, which is the tool. There's many of them. Both of the tools that we're talking about today, the High Performance Index and Principles tool, designed by Adam Grant and championed through his experience of using other tools, organizational psychologist at the Wharton School of Business with 5 million followers on LinkedIn. If you haven't looked him up, do so. And Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio funded it and is principal shareholder of the company. Ray Dalio started Bridgewater, the largest hedge fund in the world. Anyway, just to give some credibility to that it's very academically valid as well. That's a powerful tool in working with teams, because this leadership thing, as you know, Lars, in your 30 years at Bayer, it's just people working with people. Even if there's robots, it's still people working with people. So this whole person inside out approach is you have to understand yourself better. What are your default characteristics, your default traits where you feel most natural, and acknowledging where are those most useful, and when overflexed, overused, how might they work against you? Starting with yourself, then you see new things as you interact with colleagues and other people. So understanding yourself better, understanding each other better as individuals, impacts the way you work together, humans working with humans. And then finding these areas of, as they call it, free traits, or needing to express traits that aren't quite naturally you. For me, being really tough, right? There are times where I need to be more tough than my default style. There are other people who are really high in toughness who need to find opportunities to be less tough.
And if I may add to this, in a team setting, we are very well served if we have those different expressions on these dimensions in the team, because then the team can all together serve it all, provided they respect each other and see the value in that and are not irritated by this person being so tough.
Yeah. Like if you're a music person, a classical music person, I like to start with non-sport analogies first because of my bias towards sport. If you're the first violin in the Berlin Symphony Orchestra, you can't have all first violins, right? In the sports world, you can't have all goal scorers. You need those diverse traits, and you need to be aware of when and how by default you express them. How do you express them when things are good? Because it's easy when it's easy. How do you react under pressure? Can you maintain, or do you shift into somebody different? Most of us know, oh my gosh, Lars is completely different when he's losing his mind, right? When he's frustrated. So how do we handle ourselves under stress? And, the other thing too is there's this quote from a very famous book, I think it's called the Bible, that says, treat others the way you want to be treated. I believe strongly in leadership. We need to treat others the way they want to be treated. Some people need feedback in one way. Others thrive when they receive feedback another way. We need to be adaptable, and this tool measures that as well. How likely am I to adapt to my audience? Still being me, not trying to be somebody else, but meeting Lars where he's at, and meeting Mike where he's at, and meeting, right?
And along with that, this strong conviction that grew in me over 30 years in industry, and is ever more growing as I'm becoming a coach or working as a coach now. When the people come together with differences, with different perspectives, with differences in whatever you can think of, so that typical buzzword about that is diversity. But the more people are different in maybe their preferences of behaviors, maybe their functional backgrounds, or whatever you can think of, it will add. And you have an atmosphere in which every view is appreciated and people exchange very openly what they think. The result of the team will be the best you can think of. So really the diversity drives the quality of the results. And psychological safety, this openness needs to be there. So when you talk about these different traits and look at it in Principles as in that tool, it's all with appreciation. Everything is good because everything is different from the other. And through that alone adds value, provided it's expressed in the setting. Then it's
not good or bad, just a preferred style. And every preferred style If I'm low in something, it means I prefer something else. And the other things that you mentioned, the diversity of thought, which Principles calls ideas meritocracy. It's a cool word. Sounds big, but I've grown to like that. And the high performance index measures whether that's how it feels on this team or in this organization. That diverse thought is welcome, that ideas come from all levels of leadership, that people feel they can truly be themselves without repercussion. Lars, what shifted for you? Like 30 years at Bayer, senior leadership. We've talked about that in other word in our other episode. In charge of countries, continents, products. What shifted for you when you did Mark's 3-day program? Two-part question. First, we'll start with Mark. Then, when you did your own full coach training, what shifted for you when you went through Mark's Being on Mission training program that has influenced both you and I so much?
Yeah. Prior to being in that program, Mark was already for 2 years my coach.
Right.
Actually, it was interesting. We only worked on the screen together for those 2 years.
Yeah.
And then he always said, I should come to his leadership camp.
Yeah.
And eventually I gave in. And he had said, so I didn't really
You gave
know
in.
why.
Okay, so there was some resistance. You gave in. Oh, wow.
He also he said to me, I said, so why do I need to come there? We are talking anyway. And he said to me, yeah, but come and help me coaching. And I said, Mark, you're the coach. I'm the client.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, but I think you can do this. So I went to this center, and I was much clearer after the 3 days, my progress on my own mission, on my vision about myself, on the values. My clarity increased versus what I had achieved already with Mark. So that was important. And for me, this was the first time that I really did coaching in the setup that Mark creates in this workshop with the people. But I really did coaching with the people. And I learned one thing on these days. I learned that as a leader, I had always thought I was coaching my people.
Yeah.
And I learned instantaneously during these 3 days, I never was.
I got to ask you about two things there. One, I'm just going to back up. I made the false assumption when I was younger that senior leaders at your level of global leadership or a local organization are already clear on their own personal core values, vision, where they're headed, mission, what their true purpose is. And you got more clear, and this was towards the end of your long and storied corporate career. You got more clear on those things there, right?
Well, to be totally transparent and honest, it helped me in that transition because I knew I was on the way out.
Yeah.
And that was all fine and all good, but I didn't quite know yet where this was taking me.
Yeah.
And through those initial experience with coaching, it became very clear where I wanted to take this.
Yeah.
So it was also instrumental in my path forward into what I'm now doing and enjoying every day. I had a session today again with a client saying, wow, his being triggered by people's behaviors in a certain way has gone away.
Wow. Okay. And the second thing is you thought as a leader, you thought you were coaching your people, and you realized through the introduction to coaching that happens in Mark's Being on Mission program, and of course you dove into in your formal coaching training program in Berlin. Tell us a bit more about that? You thought you were coaching them, and what do you mean by that? And what were you actually doing? Oh, sorry for the balloons.
Oh, great. Balloons, wonderful. So for the listeners, there were some balloons on the screen all of a sudden.
You gave the peace sign.
As a leader, I was shifting ever more from being sort of the leader as a hero who says, I know this all and I can tell you what you need to do and just follow me. And then you do this and you do this and you do that. And then we'll be successful together. I shifted ever more to being the leader as a host, bringing together the people with different perspectives, having a very open conversation with them, often really not knowing myself what the right next step was, just listening to the team and seeing that the perspectives came together. And when they made sense together, then I thought we have a solution. This is the way that we should take it. And I thought these open conversations were sort of like coaching, but they were not. And in many situations also where I was mentoring people in the company, I was telling them, you have that situation. I see. Yeah, look, I have had that too. And here's how brilliantly I handled it. And Mark had this very clear thing. He said, number one, 80% of the time, the coachee speaks, and the coach maximum 20%. Number
Yeah.
2, no home movies. Don't tell them your stories.
Yeah.
They're irrelevant. So I struggled in these situations really, but I said, okay, give this credit. I try this. I don't come in with, yeah, I know the situation,
Mm-hmm.
which I could have done in some of these situations there because I have seen it quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say that. And the conversation, because of the questions I could ask, continued. And I realized it's absolutely not necessary.
We think we're being useful. Humans think they're being useful, but they're
You
hijacking the
think you're
conversation,
useful
right?
by telling your story, but much more useful is really listening, giving the other the time and the space, holding the space for them that they can tell their story, and that you listen, that you're genuinely interested in them, and that you understand their problem.
Imagine as a young leader, the courage it would have taken, or just the disbelief that that was your role, right? But now that's the magic. That's
Totally.
that's why I'm podcasting, right? Is the world needs to know that we can let go. Previous guest, the title of the episode is "You'd Have to Be an Idiot to Want to Be a Guru," and she says the more we can admit that we know almost nothing about anything, only then are we truly free. How can you apply that to your presence as a coach now, Lars?
I know now, and I think it's also the levels of coach proficiency that the International Coaching Federation attests to people or not. And I'm striving for my initial certification there. But I know now that the more I can pull myself out, the less this is about me, the more it's useful to the other one.
Say that again.
The more I pull myself out, the more I'm not visible, the better it is to the other one. The more benefit it gives the others. Be it a team, be it an individual.
You used from hero to host a couple of minutes ago, and when I said I learned about you, there was this guy Lars in Berlin. You got to meet this leader as facilitator. That line, I would say, summed up so succinctly what we're trying to do. The transformation from leader as the hero to leader as the host. If we could link this back, we started this conversation. I see I've hijacked the host here, but you're going to ask me in a second to sum up this journey. See, Lars is coaching right now. He's just letting me talk. This journey as we work with clients, we're trying to play that. When I leave for Europe in a couple of days here, I'm hosting them, not flying halfway across the world to be the hero. They don't need another hero, right? We gather data, we pitch ideas, we listen to what they think they need. Yes, we use some of our experience, if I dare say, expertise in working with diverse clients, to maybe make some recommendations, but then let them grab on to things. And then you're hosting the greatest gathering that you could imagine versus running around trying to offer the hors d'oeuvres and clean up the mess and greet people at the door and take their coat. We're being the ultimate host to get them from where they are now to where they want to be, right? What would you add to that?
I'm sure that when you go into your meeting next week in Europe, you don't know what the outcome will be of that meeting.
100%.
And you will find a good outcome together with the team.
And before I got into this work, I thought I had to have the answer for that, right?
Yeah.
And no matter what you plan, if you're willing to let them lead and you're willing to truly host, that outcome will be more profound and it'll be theirs to own, good, bad, or ugly, right? It'll be theirs to win or theirs to lose. Anything else you'd like to ask me today, Lars?
I've run out of questions, Nate. I'm just taking away. But Nate, it sounds like you have moved from being a coach of individuals to rather focusing on teams and companies.
Both actually. Yes, great question. A lot of coaches work one-to-one. And what I'm finding is the power of keeping that leader's team involved. And of course, there's some potential for conflict of interest or trickiness. So sometimes, for example, I bring you in as a coach of one of those leaders. When with the team, I use something called the shared experience model, which is actually borrowed from a CEO support group, where on those team coaching calls, and maybe here's another example and a win of a recent client. They were a little nervous about engaging in the process and wasn't quite sure what it was going to be like. And so I just shared what the process was going to be. So there's 6 people on the call. We go around to each person. Each person gives a headline, like 30 seconds or less, which can be tough for some people. A headline. What is an aspiration they have right now as a leader or a challenge they're facing? We hear from everybody and we decide who's going to go first. Then the group turns off their cameras. This is virtual. It can be done in person too. By turning off their camera, maybe they turn their chair around, right? It feels weird at first, but then they see the power of it. And I coach that person a little bit more on, tell me more about your headline, dive into it a little deeper. Okay. Then what would you like to get out of this 15 minutes of this session that's for you? Coach a little bit more. And then they turn their camera off or turn their chair. And it's the only healthy time in leadership. We're allowed to talk about someone behind their back. The group, without giving advice, because advice is useless, as you and I know, most of the time. We could do a whole episode on advice. But anyway, the group talks about experiences they have had, what they think they heard, what they might consider trying if they were in that situation. This is that time where their own story can be useful, but it's moderated by me in terms of, I tried this and it worked, or I tried this and it was a total failure. Okay. Just kind of explore that. And the other person, who's the coachee in this sense, is just listening. And it's fascinating when they're not listening to respond and they're actually listening to listen and given time to think. They make some notes on what they're hearing and just making sense of it in their own mind. And then we reverse again. We turn off the group's cameras and I coach that person again for a few minutes. And not only do they almost always have more clarity, they've heard something that's useful. Other people in the group are also thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, this has happened to me too, or that's going to help me in my situation. And in the words of a client recently, they said, I didn't know what we were getting into. That was the strangest meeting I've ever been in, and I can't wait to do it again.
Fantastic. Again, goosebumps on my skin, because it is these practices that can change the dynamic in a team. And this is, of course, has levels of appreciation, respect, caring for one another, because one thinks into it maybe more than in a discussion situation when one just discusses that without the person, but the person is listening in. So there's so many positive effects. It's probably trust building, I would suspect, in the team, and can have very positive effects. And there's other practices that we can
that's
really
a model.
We've experienced that.
Yeah, that's a model, that's a structure. And I keep saying, if this is working for you, let's do it. If it's not, absolutely, we can try something else, right? That's that learning part for us. And I should say, I'm part of a group of coaches run by a gentleman named Brian Dugan in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He's a MCC level ICF coach, which means very experienced, almost 3,000 hours of practicing doing what you and I do. And still calls it a practice, doesn't consider himself an expert. And coaches, we bring challenges or aspirations that we have, and we do that exact same model. And every time it's so useful. And this group that said this was weird and we want to do it again, they're the one that said, hey, maybe we could try that on our own. And how inspiring is that they even want to try, right? That they're willing to work in new ways that can be more efficient and effective than how they currently run meetings.
And Nate, this is probably what we really are there for, to help them to do something in a sustainable way, in a different way, and benefit from it.
Yeah.
And isn't that a fantastic way of closing this? We were sharing thoughts together, I guess. That's what it was in the end. I enjoyed this session very much with you, Nate. I thank you very much for being my guest in this podcast of yours. And I look forward to all further collaboration that we will have. And I'm very sure it will be inspirational and beneficial. Thank you very much, Nate.
Thanks for hosting, Lars. And we know we have more topics to cover, so this won't be the last time that we do this together. Thanks, Lars.
Thanks for listening to Leading with Curiosity. Please share, follow, and rate the show so that other leaders can make positive change in the world. Connect with Nate at nateleslie.ca. And remember, the brain behaves very differently when encouraged to think rather than told to listen.